Joe Biden has been declaring war on gun owners and the gun industry since he took office. That's right. Turns out, though, that sometimes when he tries to play games with the American gun industry, the American gun owners, it doesn't work out the way they like. And that is the case down there in Florida in a case involving the Kiloton Tactical LLC, FFL, gun company. And I'm happy to report they had a major victory against the ATF administratively, and it was reported on in a federal district court case dealing with a preliminary injunction. Let's break down this big win and the black eye that Kiloton Tactical LLC gave the ATF just recently. Stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and author of Disarmed, What the Ukraine War Teaches Americans About the Right to Bear Arms. Check it out if you don't already have a copy. More news about the next book's coming out very soon. All right, folks, so congratulations to Kiloton Tactical LLC, a gun company down there in Florida. They got into a fight with Joe Biden's ATF over Biden's quote-unquote zero-tolerance policy, and I'm happy to report that the good guys prevailed. Kiloton Tactical LLC, despite being threatened by the Biden administration to lose their FFL license, their federal firearms license, among other things, has prevailed. Specifically, we're going to break this down into geeky detail, and then we're going to talk about what is the Biden administration trying to do in these games. So specifically, just to step back for a moment and put this all into context, you probably recall that Joe Biden has been declaring war ever since he took office on the gun industry, and as well as gun owners is all kind of one and the same, because if you don't have a gun industry, you can't buy guns, which makes it hard to be a gun owner. That's not that hard to connect. Joe Biden understands this. So does the anti-gun lobby in America. So anyway, one of the problems that Joe Biden has is he's very difficult to get lost through Congress dealing with guns, unless, of course, you have John Cornyn on the other side, that moron senator from Texas. I don't understand what's wrong with you people in Texas. How do you put John Cornyn in office? I hope you're going to remember what he did by selling us out in the gun space back there in 2022, which is exactly when we were winning NYSERPA versus Bruin, and John Cornyn is selling us out by passing the first major gun control laws in decades and giving Joe Biden a win. Why John Cornyn would do that, but set that issue aside. Bottom line is, other than that one victory in Congress, which we gave to them because our Republicans half the time are dumb, by and large, Joe Biden has been attacking gun owners in the gun industry through executive office, basically doing the Barack Obama, I have a pen and a phone, and therefore I can govern as a king approach to gun control. One of the things that the Biden administration has done is they implemented this thing called zero tolerance policy against FFLs, meaning the gun industry. Specifically, what the Biden administration issued in terms of regulation was the following. The policy directs the ATF to revoke the licenses of dealers the first time that they violate federal law by willfully, 1, transferring a firearm to a prohibited person, 2, failing to run a required background check, 3, falsifying records such as a firearms transaction form, 4, failing to respond to an ATF tracing request, or 5, refusing to permit ATF to conduct an inspection in violation of the law. So with that in mind, it turns out that the Kiloton Tactical LLC company down there in Florida has had a FFL license for many years. They then asked to renew their license a few years back, and the ATF said, no, we're not going to renew your license because we think that you violated various laws and you haven't complied with all the rules and regulations. Well, Kiloton obviously made the right choice. Kiloton Tactical made the right choice. They apparently went out and hired an appropriate lawyer, as is what you should do if you get crossways with the government, whether it be state or federal. It doesn't matter. If you get crossways with the government, you should be using lawyers to fight back. And don't try to do it yourself. It's very dangerous to do that. But anyway, the good news is Kiloton objected to this and said that if you're going to terminate my license, we're going to take this to an administrative hearing. And at the same time, effectively at the same time, they also brought a federal lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Florida in the Pensacola division up there. So what happens? Well, this is very interesting, and I think the ATF thing here is very interesting. We're going to talk about it. So it turns out that after this hearing, the ATF did two things. One is they basically lost the hearing, and Kiloton won the hearing. So Kiloton did not lose its license. That's a good thing. The other thing is kind of interesting is at the same time, they renewed Kiloton Tactical's license. So they didn't. Not only did they not terminate the license, they renewed it for many more years. I think up until something like 2025 or so. Now, what's interesting though is that at the same time, this federal lawsuit is pending, and just recently, just a couple days ago, the United States District Court for the Northern District of Florida denied the preliminary injunction sought by the plaintiffs in this case, including Kiloton Tactical LLC. They denied the motion for preliminary injunction on the grounds that it was moot because the court said, well, you've already won everything that you can possibly win for all intents and purposes. You've got your license. You aren't terminated. They renewed your license. So, move forward in Godspeed. There were some technical arguments about whether or not this zero tolerance policy could be challenged in court by other FFLs and so on. But at the end of the day, it doesn't look like the record was sufficiently developed for the court to feel appropriate to enter a preliminary injunction, so denied the preliminary injunction on the grounds that the plaintiffs, the Second Amendment plaintiffs, the gun company here, had already prevailed over the ATF. So the question really becomes is what really was going on here? Now, obviously, I have no personal information about the parties here or any private information or anything like that, so I can only speculate to some degree, but it seems very suspect to me. Let me tell you what it appears as an outsider looking in. Again, I have no inside information or private information or anything about the parties or anything going on here. But it seems to me what may have happened is the ATF, at the behest of Merrick Garland and Joe Biden, the anti-gunners in chief, said, go get these FFLs. Be a tough guy. Be a bully. Be a bully. The one thing you can say about this Department of Justice is they are bullies. They're especially bullies with people that are defenseless. If you look at a lot of those, financially ordinary people of financial ordinary means associated with January 6th and all the things that are going on down there in D.C., which is the backyard of the DOJ, right? They're all part of that deep state D.C. cohort. But again, let's set that issue aside for now. It does appear as what may have happened here, the ATF may have decided to bully another FFL into submission, and by saying to Kiloton, hey, look, we're going to take away your license, and we're going to also not renew it, and we're going to suspend you, and so on and so on. We're essentially going to put you out of business using our legal lawyers and our games. But it turns out that here you have a situation where the ATF bully was really, they punched back. They fought back against the bully and got in their face and said, no, we're going to fight this tooth and nail. And they ultimately prevailed. The ATF essentially backed down and lost the administrative hearing and backed down on these various arguments and said, okay, mea culpa, we lose. So it's very interesting as to whether or not the ATF would have really tried to put this company out of business had they not acquired lawyers and fought the good fight against the federal government. Now, a lot of people can't afford to fight the good fight against the federal government, and the government knows this. So I wonder whether or not the tactic of the administration, the Biden administration, is simply to say, look, we're going to threaten all these FFLs, and some of them are going to roll over and simply give up because they cannot afford to fight, or they don't know a good lawyer, or they hire a bad lawyer, whatever it is. But if you get yourself a good lawyer, which, Kiloton Tactical must have done so, and get good legal representations, it looks like the ATF will either lose and or back down. So that's kind of interesting. But of course, the reality is this. Even though this is ultimately a victory, it looks like, for Kiloton Tactical, it's still a loss for the Second Amendment community in the following way. Because to me, the ATF and the Department of Justice and the Biden administration continue to engage in lawfare, which is warfare by virtue of legal means. They want to force you to go hire lawyers. They want to force you to lose sleep about your future. They want to distract you from growing your business, because if you're tied up in a legal case, a lawsuit, there's a possibility you may be indicted. Whatever it is, if you get bollocksed up in any of these legal problems, for most people, this is mentally devastating and it's hard for them to move forward. And if you're dealing with a company that they're basically saying, we're going to take your license, and if we take your license, you're going to be out of business. Well, I think it's very difficult to, grow the company, to focus on building the company, to focus on hiring and expanding your profit margins, to expand the business, to improve the business. It's hard to do all of this if you're worried about you may not even be in business in a month or two because you may lose your license, your FFL. So I think at the end of the day, all of this is a version of lawfare against the gun industry, and they don't care at the end of the day if they win or lose. ATF lost this case here, but I'm sure it was a total headache and cost money to fight the ATF. And so I don't even know if they care about losing at the end of the day. They just care about imposing costs and headaches on gun owners and the gun industry in all respects. So the only other observation I want to make about this is it's very interesting that when the judge here denied the motion for preliminary injunction, they did so on a couple grounds. One is they said that Killerton had already won, so there was nothing to adjudicate, nothing to enjoin, because ATF had lost the case for all intents and purposes. But then the judge made an interesting observation. He says also the plaintiffs have not identified any other potential FFLs that may be getting, jeopardized by virtue of this zero tolerance policy by the Biden administration. So that got me to thinking the one thing that the Second Amendment community should always have, especially these various gun right groups that are out there fighting, and they maybe are already doing this, is there's two things that all the gun rights groups should have a stable of. One is they should have one or more strong, reliable, trustworthy attorneys in every state at a minimum. And to the extent you have multiple attorneys in a given state, especially if it's a larger state, like in Illinois, like New York, like New Jersey or California, you really do want to make sure you have a stable of good lawyers, especially in states maybe you're not as familiar with, because you never know when you need a local lawyer to solve a problem. That's the first thing, to have a stable of lawyers. All these Second Amendment groups should make sure they know who they're going to call if a case pops up out of the blue in a particular state. The second thing I think that all these groups should have a stable of is potential plaintiffs. If I were running a gun rights organization, I would make sure that not only did I have good lawyers in every state, I would go out and find, trustworthy, vetted gun owners in every state, gun companies in every state, FFLs in every state, and so on and so on. And I would want to have those lists prepared now before you need them. So if you ever have a situation where, for example, adding or naming or getting affidavits from additional people might become valuable for some reason you can't even anticipate today, but you will need it down the road. It seems to me having a stable of good lawyers in every state and good potential plaintiffs in every state and as many parts of every state as possible would be prudent and wise in the Second Amendment community. All right, folks, hope you learned a little bit something here today. Hope this wasn't too geeky. Don't forget to follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner. I tweet stuff out several times throughout the day in addition to my Second Amendment information here. So you may want to check that out, X at 4Boxes Diner. And we will see you again soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.